There is always going to be a majority in the House of Commons for a pragmatic and sensible Brexit, which is, I think, what is an offer potentially in the Chequers deal. And we wanted to give the Prime Minister space in order to be able to negotiate that. And I very much regret that some colleagues decided they wanted to amend this particular bill and to make life difficult for the government at this time. It's wholly unnecessary. We just want to give the government space, and I think the mood of the country is, please get people to get on with it.
But you're now in a situation where as it were, the Remainers and Conservative Party have said quite clearly there's absolutely no way that the EU is going to accept this. So essentially then, this white paper is dead in the water.
I don't know how you can say that the EU is clearly not going to accept this, because we haven't had any formal reaction or negotiations. The point is, it's a starting point. It's proposing an association agreement, a common rule book. It's respecting the result of the referendum, obviously something that I did not campaign for, but we are going to be leaving the European Union, and that's why the Prime Minister deserves the space to be able to negotiate and discuss with the EU over the forthcoming weeks what she has described as a sort of hard-headed and practical suggestion.
But the hard Brexiteers are closing in, and there's talk again of these 48 letters to the 1922 committee. It is perfectly possible that she's not going to survive this.
Well, I think that's not where the majority of the Conservative Parliamentary Party is. I mean, people do not want there to be a leadership challenge.
But it may be inevitable.
Well, things have become inevitable because people don't stand up and say that's not what we want to be. And the majority of the Parliamentary Party have made it clear to some colleagues that they absolutely do not want there to be any form of leadership contest. They want the Prime Minister's leadership to continue. They want there to be space to negotiate Chequers. There is unfortunately a hardcore of people, hard Brexiteers in my party, who have caused trouble for successive Conservative governments and leaders for the best part of 30 years. They continue to do so, and I think they're doing an enormous disservice to this country.
Well, there's two things there. We'll talk about the impact on the Conservative Party in a moment. But what do you think people think in the country? That actually the elected members of Parliament for the United Kingdom cannot get their act together to fulfil what the promise was of the referendum?
Well, I think the honest truth is that it was not clear what the promise was of the referendum, other than the one question, are you going to leave or are we going to remain members of the EU? We are leaving the EU. That part of the referendum is absolutely being fulfilled. Of course, you know, many millions of people voted for that, many millions of people did not vote for that. The question is how and on what basis. And that's why we think, you know, I don't agree with everything in the Chequers white paper, for example. I think there are definitely questions about services and what's going to happen with financial services, but it's a good starting point for negotiations with the EU.
And as you say, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg and others do not wish this. And you said that this problem over Europe has been at the heart of the Conservative Party for 30 years. Do you actually think the Conservative Party can survive this?
I think that it will survive if people want it to in my party. We've got to be very determined about that. But that means listening and means obviously from the leader, the Prime Minister downwards, everybody working to listen, to respect, to heal the divisions. What was not needed this week were colleagues of mine putting down amendments designed to wreck and to scupper Chequers.
Right.
That isn't fair. Now, we've seen obviously the government, much to the upset of a number of Conservative MPs like me, who voted not to accept those amendments this evening, have done so. We have the trade bill coming before us tomorrow. We will listen very carefully to what the Minister says, but it's very important that those bills obviously do get their third readings and get onto the progress through Parliament.
Now we're in a situation where we're going in a minute to talk to the colleague on your left, who is David Davis. But I would say to you that during the last few days, the word is that the Brexiteers, led by Jacob Rees-Mogg, have been taking copious briefings from ex-ministers. Before we speak to him, because I know we don't have any blue and blue discussions, seriously, what would you say to David Davis tonight?
What I would say, David, well, I was listening to David's speech earlier on today, and actually he spoke to the House in a very calm and measured way about his experiences as Minister. He implored colleagues not to vote against the third reading of the bill, and that didn't happen tonight. People gave it their support. So I think there's a serious attempt. But I think that the point is that actually what's been put on the table, you know, David's done in terms of he made a decision. This is a proposal he couldn't support, therefore he has resigned from government. It is completely normal for members of Parliament, backbench government members to put down amendments, to probe and to try to improve legislation. It's not normal for people to try to scupper. That's not where David is. He's got the benefit of his experiences. But the point is, if Chequers isn't what's going to be on the table, what's the alternative plan?
Well,
that's why I think we should give Chequers a really good go.
Well, that's exactly a very good question. And now, if you would step aside, and I will speak to David Davis now and exactly say that. If you're not necessarily out to scupper the Chequers white paper, you want an alternative. What is the plan? What is the plan right now, David Davis? Because inevitably, what happened to you on Sunday night has triggered what has happened today.
Well, I mean, the first thing to say about this is, look, this is an incredibly important decision, or set of decisions the House of Commons taken. It's perfectly normal for people to take very different views and be very passionate about it. We've had another minister go this evening over one of these amendments, so you shouldn't be surprised at that. Of course, I have a different view on what we should be doing. I think we shouldn't be so closely harmonised with European law. We should be allowed to go our own way. That was a decision I thought we'd taken some time ago. We should be very careful about arrangements on customs that might lead the European Union to want to have basically administrative control over our customs and our borders. Those sorts of things are bound to cause very, very strong emotions and very, very serious arguments. As Nicky said, I tried to put some of those arguments as calmly as possible today, and in particular said to people, don't be destructive, don't defeat these bills, because these bills are necessary whatever policy we take.
But where do you stand on what people are saying that actually the EU negotiators are not going to take Section 17 as amended because they don't want that?
Well, let's see. I mean, Nicky was right that it's not a good idea to just guess at what the European negotiators will do. I mean, one of my criticisms, frankly, of the government to date is we've been too willing to accept at first blush everything they say. Now, any negotiation, you're going to set out positions. You're going to telegraph perhaps more than you expect to do, and that's what goes on here. So, you know, we can only test it. We can go out there and test it. If I was still in government, I would say, okay, on the plane, or send the negotiators on the plane and get to Brussels and talk to them.
You know, David Davis, that however you might say that you are loyal to Theresa May is weakened tonight. She's had to take this amendment. She's had to take this amendment by, I don't know if you were one of the briefers of Jacob Rees-Mogg. It looks like he can do it perfectly well on his own, but there's no doubt that you might say it's the policy you don't want. But the truth is that you've weakened the Prime Minister, and she could be heading for the exit.
So I didn't get that last bit?
And she could be heading for the exit. You have weakened the Prime Minister. When you walked out on Sunday night, followed by Boris Johnson, you weakened the Prime Minister.
Look, I made a decision which was based on a difference of principle. You know, I was the Minister, the Secretary of State responsible for the exit of the European Union. The policy being put forward was one that I did not believe in. It would have been dishonest to stay and pretend that I did believe in it, and frankly I would have been useless at it. I mean, you know, if you've got a policy, you really have to believe in it. And I didn't believe in this. What else did you expect me to do? But
it is absolutely extraordinary that you, as the Brexit Minister, and we can go over this again, didn't see it coming. Should you not have stayed and fought your corner? You walked away. Have you not disappointed and let down the electorate?
With the greatest respect, you know nothing about what went before. And there were lots of discussions before, including from letters and discussions, and it didn't change the line. So it didn't change the line. I had to go. Very simple.
Are you not all letting down the electorate by this inability to come to a decision?
What, do you think the electorate would expect me to do something I thought was wrong? That strikes me as entirely implausible. My impression of my electorate, and I stand for election, is that they want you to do the right thing, and the right thing in your own mind. They want you to be principled. They want you to stand up for what you believe in. And what I want to stand up for is that 17.5 million voted to leave the European Union and, frankly, leave the single market and the customs union. That was what was said in the referendum of both sides and what was in our manifesto. So I'm afraid I'm just doing what I think the electorate expect me to do.
Very much indeed, David Davis.
Thank you.
Well, I'm delighted now to be joined by the former Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg. Nick Clegg, first of all, your reaction to what happened tonight?
To be honest, I think one shouldn't devote too much energy and attention to all the endless twists and turns of these amendments, because the big picture that counts is, firstly, this is a government now in an outright state of degeneration. It basically can't govern. It's now internally paralysed. Secondly, the EU wouldn't accept the Chequers deal molested by Rees-Mogg's amendments or not anyway.
Of course, Theresa May denies that completely.
Well, I know for a fact that government negotiators have been told that this facilitated customs arrangement or whatever bogus title they apply it to simply will not be accepted by EU negotiators, and that the British negotiators have been told that some time ago. And thirdly,
but it could be brinkmanship.
It could, well, look, David Davis says you don't know what the EU response is until you hear it, sure, but equally, I don't think one needs to look too hard at what is in effect a ludicrous suggestion to realise that this won't work, and let me explain why. No one can reasonably expect that the EU27 should remit to a third country the essential, vital task of policing its external commercial border and collecting taxes which don't belong to us to then to send them onwards to Brussels. That is never, ever going to fly in Brussels, and they've made it quite clear privately, and I'm sure they'll make it clear publicly in the coming weeks. But the crucial thing behind all of this is we are running out of time. The time is simply no longer available to present to MPs a coherent package in October, yet alone on the 29th of March next year. So my view is, given that clearly everyone's going around the bend with all these different amendments and this endless psychodrama within the Conservative Party, and we have this deeply dysfunctional government, we should be planning now in a grown-up and calm way. Absolutely. Well, there is simply no way that this huge, momentous decision, which will have profound impacts on almost every aspect of British public life for years to come, can be done under the frenzy and hysteria and undue haste of this compressed timetable.
The problem with that is that the decision was made for the end of March next year, and you're not so sure, nobody could be sure the EU would grant an extension of Article 50.
No, of course you can't be sure about anything in this case. But one thing I can tell you is it's a whole lot better than crashing out with any deal at all, and it's a whole lot more honest with the British people than presenting Parliament, which is what the government is likely now to do, with a pig in a poke in October, where the T's won't be crossed, the I's won't be dotted, and we will basically be lurching out of the European Union in the March of next year without knowing before we leave what our onward destination is. And I think that would be a huge failing of basic democratic principle that we shouldn't opt for a future until we know what that future is.
And I'm going to talk to you further in a moment about Justine Greening's idea for a second referendum. But first, before I do that, we're not quite sure. Did Vince Cable and Tim Farron vote against the amendments tonight?
I have no idea. I'm not in Parliament anymore.
Well, I thought you just might have had a connection. You might have known. Let me go on now to talk about Justine Greening's, as it were, single transferable vote way of doing a second referendum. That you vote for the deal, the 3 votes. That she wants a second referendum, which you can vote for the deal that Theresa May has come up with, and you can vote for no deal, or you can vote to remain in the EU. A good idea?
My own view is that it is right to say that whenever, out of all of this turbulence and all of the twists and turns of this sorry story, when we know what the future of leaving the European Union looks like, I think it's right that that should go to the British people. I think it is too early, frankly, to say that there's a list or a menu of 3 questions, 4 questions, 5 questions. And also, incidentally, I should say, I think it's highly unlikely, with the best will in the world, that you could hold a new referendum before the 29th of March. Anyway, I think what people need to understand, and there's no indignity in this, is saying, look, the government clearly triggered Article 50 way too early before they knew what Brexit they wanted to pursue. They still don't. The EU27 is scratching its head. A country which used to pride itself in political stability and diplomatic aplomb is now a byword for pantomime farce. I think we should everyone should calm down over the summer and give us more time.
The summer might be starting a little early because they're talking about the recess being Thursday.
That is another sign of degeneration in the government. They can't even run the risk of continuing to put themselves before Parliament beyond this coming Thursday.
Thank you very much indeed. And now, following Nick Clegg, we are joined by the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Peter Dowd. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. Tell me, it was high drama in the Chamber, but Labour were voting against an amendment that Theresa May said would be acceptable to Europe. And haven't you let down all the people in your constituency who voted to leave and leave well?
No, we haven't. What we had there today is complete shambles. Frankly, you had the white paper and all those votes tonight, or a fair amount of them, actually overturned that. It was just a complete mess, and I think the fact that we almost got within 2 or 3 votes of beating the government on those some of those issues is actually just shows how pathetic the situation is with the government. I mean, they're in complete chaos.
But we still, as yet, do not know exactly where Labour stands. I mean, I know you talk about the 6 tests and so forth, but we're not sure how piecemeal Jeremy Corbyn's going to play this. So where is the red line, in as much as this was about customs? That's a red line. You have to be in the customs union.
I mean, we've had this 1,001 times, haven't we? We set out the 6 tests 18 months ago, and when we talk about them, we get told we're not consistent. There are 6 tests. They come together, they're a clump, they're a collective of 6 issues. We've been clear about that for the past 18 months. I mean, I don't really know how much clearer we can actually be on those issues. And then when I start to repeat what the tests are, people tell me, oh, we know what they are. Well, you can't have it both ways. You either know what they are or you don't know what they are, but they're perfectly clear. You might not like them, but they're clear.
If it comes to it, that there's a situation where a combination of Labour and indeed hard Brexiteers could bring down the government over this, would you do it?
Well, look, let's be clear about this. Our line is we will not support a deal unless it fits those 6 tests. Everybody should know what the tests are. I won't repeat them because I get interrupted when I do try to repeat them. As far as we're concerned, perfectly clear, we will vote a deal down if it doesn't fulfil those 6 tests. We can't be any clearer than that. And I'm not getting into all hypothetical stuff. We had enough of that today in the chamber. That's our position and we'll stick to it.
Is it not the case, though, that people simply want this done? And, you know, for business, for people's personal lives, for jobs, for migration, for all these reasons, it looks as if politicians actually do not have the best interests of the country at the heart of it. They have the best interests of themselves at the heart of it.
No, quite the opposite. We've said we want jobs, a Brexit for jobs, a Brexit for the economy. We've made that clear. Our 6 tests, again, I'm boring people, but it's perfectly clear. We've set those tests out for the past 18 months. We're clear we want a Brexit for the economy and we want a Brexit for jobs. And listening to some of those Tory MPs there tonight, they didn't give 2 hoots for those jobs and the economy, because they're in for this for their own ideological and theological reasons, and I can't fathom them out.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight.